Good day, Deepen Word family. Welcome to day 260 of our Bible study review. Today we're opening up a new book, the book of Ecclesiastes. It's a wisdom book, and it's written by the man who was given wisdom from on high, King Solomon. Today we're going through chapters 1 through 3, and we're going to see that the wise man who had access to everything sees the vanity in the pursuit of material things. He sees that the greatest thing we could ever do is to chase and pursue Yahweh or Elohim. Now remember, after Solomon had built the temple and he consecrated, sanctified it, and he made so many sacrifices unto Yahweh, then Yahweh answered his prayers and he said, whatever it is that you ask of me, I will give you. And Solomon did not ask for a material thing. He asked for a spiritual thing. He asked for the wisdom to be able to rightly rule over the people. Yahuwah, the Father, was impressed with his request because it was selfless. He wanted to serve the kingdom. Does this sound familiar? Seek first the kingdom and all else will be added unto you. Solomon was seeking the kingdom because as a king, you had to know the law back and forwards, and you had to speak the law in front of the people. But he wanted the wisdom to be able to do it right, to bring justice to the kingdom. Now, if you've ever read the story before, you know that Solomon falls to the temptation of the flesh, and he speaks of these things within this book. Let's open up with chapter 1, starting from verse 1. These are the words of the preacher, the son of David, the king in Jerusalem. Every king of Jerusalem is called to be a preacher of the word. Absolutely. And so King Solomon says, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What benefit is there to a man in all of his labors that he toils under the sun? Down to the middle of verse 8, he says, the eye is not satisfied with what it sees, and the ear is not content with what it hears. What has been is the same as what will be, and what has been done is the same as what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Verse 10, is there a matter where it is said, see, this is truly new? You know what I see in King Solomon? Solomon is craving the eternal things. Solomon is craving New Jerusalem, but he sees that all else is temporal. He sees that no matter what he does, he's still going to go to the grave. So he sees everything as vanity. Verse 12, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. I set my heart to seek and investigate with the wisdom everything that is done under heaven. It is a burdensome task that Elohim has given to the sons of men by which they may be occupied. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity, like chasing the wind. Nothing satisfies him. Do you know why that is? Because the Father has placed eternity in all of our hearts. And so truly, unless we chase him, these things we will see eventually. It's vanity. It's a waste of time. Let's pick up in verse 18. Solomon says, for in an abundance of wisdom is an abundance of frustration, and he who increases knowledge also increases in sorrow. So how can we translate this? This can mean a couple of things. So for us, when we come to the true knowledge, which is the knowledge from on high, it may bring us sorrow that we know of these things and we try to tell it to our fellow image bearers, but they don't see it. And we see that they are increasing after vanities and they're wasting their lives. It can truly become a sorrow to us to watch them waste their life away. When people don't have the true wisdom, which is knowing Yahuwah, which is knowing of the kingdom, they increase in worldly knowledge. They gather up all of these material things, but at the very end, they will burn up and they won't transfer into eternity. They won't mean a doggone thing. And so I think that King Solomon is talking about how man increases his sorrows because he chases after knowledge, but he doesn't chase after the wisdom, the true wisdom that comes from on high. Let's open up chapter 2 and read from verse 1. And so since he's sitting in this frustration, this is what Solomon says. He says, I said in my heart, come, and I will test you with selfish pleasures to experience desires. And notice that this too is vanity. Then Solomon talks about all of his great works. We know that he's responsible for building the temple. He built vineyards, he built houses, he built so much. The kingdom of his day was just a glimpse, it was a shadow of the true kingdom that is to come. Let's pick up in the middle of verse 9. Solomon says, "All the while my wisdom remained with me, and everything that my eyes wanted, I did not refuse them, and I did not withhold my heart from selfish pleasure." We know that for a fact. And it says, "For my heart was glad from all of my efforts, and this was my reward for all of my hard work." So he built up the kingdom, right? His kingdom was glorious. Other kingdoms would come to hear of his wisdom. And he said, "You know what? I built all this stuff. Now let me enjoy myself." And so he went to enjoy those selfish pleasures and still not satisfied. He realizes that all of those selfish pleasures, they're foolish. And so he says in verse 13, "Then I saw that there is more benefit in wisdom than in foolishness, more benefit in light than in darkness. A wise man has eyes in his head, so he sees where he walks, but the fool continues in darkness. Yet I perceive that the same fate overtakes them all." Verse 15, "Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will also happen to me. So to what advantage is my wisdom? Then I said to myself, this is also vanity, for there is no lasting memory for the wise or the fool, by which in the coming days everyone will be forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool." Solomon had no idea that he would be raised from the dead and enjoy the pleasures of New Jerusalem. In his mind, he's like, when I die, that's it. So what is all this for? It's vanity. And so he says in verse 17, "And I began to hate life, for the labor that was done under the sun was contemptible to me, for all of this was vanity and chasing the wind. And I despised all of the toil in which I labored under the sun, which I will give up to the man who comes after me. And who knows if this man will be wise or a fool? Yet he will gain power over every labor that I have toiled and my use of wisdom under the sun." He's like, so the next man will come up after me, and I don't know if he's going to squander it. So what did I do all of this for? Solomon continues. He says, "Also, this is vanity. So I turned to give my heart up to despair concerning all of the toil of my labors under the sun." You know, all that deep thinking got him depressed. If only he knew of the better promises to come. Let's continue reading in verse 21. He says, "For there is no man who labors with wisdom, knowledge, and skill. Yet to a man who did not labor for this, he leaves it as an inheritance. So also this is vanity and great distress." Picking up in verse 24, he says, "There is nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and find enjoyment in his labor. This also I saw is from the hand of Elohim. For who can eat or have enjoyment more so than I?" He's like, I'm the richest man in the world. Why is this man in the world? He says, "For to a man who is pleasing before him, Elohim gives him wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner, he gives the work of gathering and collecting to him who is pleasing before Elohim. Also, this is vanity and chasing the wind." So Solomon also said that it is worthless. It's a waste of time to be a sinner, because everything that you work hard to do, you're going to hand it over to the righteous ones. Now let's open up in chapter 3. Solomon says, "To everything there is a season, a time and purpose for everything under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up." And he goes on and on and on. He sees the cycle of life. Let's pick up in verse 9. He says, "What benefit does the worker have in his toil? I have seen the task that Elohim has given to the sons of men to be concerned with. He has made everything beautiful in its appropriate time. He has also put obscurity in their hearts so that no one comes to know the work that Elohim has done from the beginning to the end." Well, Solomon didn't have that knowledge then, but we do. We are held for better promises, but Solomon had no idea. Picking up in the middle of verse 15, "And Elohim seeks out what has been driven away." And then he clarifies what has been driven away since the fall of Adam. He says in verse 16, "In the place of justice there was wickedness, and in the place of righteousness there was wickedness." Righteousness and justice is what has been driven away. And then King Solomon says, I thought in my heart, Elohim will bring judgment to the righteous and the wicked, for there is an appropriate time for every matter and every deed. So then he contemplates and he says, what's the benefit? Because man goes down to the dust just like an animal. And so he says, all are from the dust and all return to the dust. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of animals goes down to the earth? Well, we know it now. I know that's a great debate within the body, but we will see later on that the spirit of man returns back to its maker. Solomon was not satisfied under the original covenant. His heart was longing for the new covenant. On account of the spirit of man returning back to the maker, we have examples in scripture of this. There's the transfiguration, the Mount of Transfiguration, where Moses and Elijah, they show up. Their physical bodies are dead, but their souls and spirits are very much alive, and they spoke with Messiah. And we also saw the souls that were martyred under the altar in heaven in the book of Revelation, and they're crying out for the Father to bring justice upon their deaths. But not all of ancient Israel understood eternity. They didn't. They thought when they go down to the grave, that's it. But that's not the story. Those who were faithful in the old, and yes, they kept the Passover, it was pointing to our Messiah. And so they held on to their faith as they looked forward to the promises spoken of by Moses. Moses said in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 15, Yahweh your Elohim will raise up for you a prophet from the midst of you, of your brothers, like me. You must listen to him. Let's go down to the middle of verse 18. He says, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he will speak to them all that I command him. It will be that whoever will not listen to my words, which he will speak in my name, I will require it of him. He means his life. And so if they held on to those promises, and ancient Israel, right, we know that the majority of them have rejected the Messiah. They rejected the one that Moses spoke of. And so many of them, unfortunately, are not going to enter into the new covenant. But this is not the case for you. You are well aware of who that prophet is. That's the Son of the living El. That's our Messiah. He spoke no separate word from the Father. He and the Father are one. They are Echad. And he spoke the words of the Father. He came to reveal the Father and the plans of the Father, which is to bring the everlasting kingdom, the eternity that he has placed on our hearts. He has come to reveal his plans. And so that wasn't revealed to King Solomon, but that is revealed to you and I. We are truly blessed. The everlasting kingdom will come down to earth, and our Heavenly Father will dwell among us, and we will live happily ever after. Deep and Word family, that's all that I have for you today. Until tomorrow, Yah bless.